Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry. Today I'm going to give a review of how this Good Nature A24 rodent trap worked this year. You may have seen us struggling with trying to get rid of some mice and other small rodents in our garden this year. I got tired of losing different vegetables at different times of the day. We couldn't put our traps out during the day, our regular spring traps, because we have a cat, we have a dog, we don't want the birds to get killed. So, what to do? Well, the answer was this carbon dioxide powered automatic trap. It works very, very well. What's great about it is we were able to just put it out in the garden in some very specific spots and let it run all by itself. And it did a great job getting mice. We didn't actually see the mouse bodies because this would go off at different times of the day, and sometimes we'd have scavengers come in and grab the bodies. The nice thing is a cat can't put its paw up there, a dog can't get its paw up there, and it takes a really determined person to stick your finger up and have a problem. So, would I buy this again? You know, I don't know. It was pretty pricey. It was, at the time that I bought it, it was about $160. That's a lot of money. On the other hand, it did stop the mice from ravaging our garden. We'll see how it goes next year. If you have the money, it's definitely worth a try. Here, because we have so many rodents that come into our yard from the surrounding area, we need to do everything we can to get rid of them. This does that job. Now, we haven't gotten any rats in it. We sure haven't gotten any gophers because they don't really come out of the ground all that much. So, it's done a good job on mice. Hasn't done much of a job on rats. That's okay. We can trap the rats in the evening with a spring trap and it gets them just fine. I've heard this trap go off a number of times. Haven't found the mice. Well, it's time to get on to today's build. Now, I'm in the process of building a 12-volt lithium iron phosphate battery for Irene's business. I bought these cells quite a while ago in the anticipation that we would have to be at an event earlier this month. We weren't able to go for a whole variety of reasons, so we didn't need this battery built, so I put it off to do some other things. It's time to put it together now. It's been hanging around for enough months to get going. Well, let me start taking the individual cells out of this package. Now, these cells were shipped from China by cargo container. They got here before cargo containers really started getting backed up. And because it's coming from a pretty long distance, it's packed really, really tight. There's great quality foam to provide padding. I just pulled out one of the dividers so I have enough room to start pulling out these cells. They're still a tight fit. Man, that is tight. But that's how they keep the cells from being damaged during shipment. There's one, There's 2. There's 3. And there's 4. Now, before I get started with the next part of this build, I need to correct something that I misspoke about yesterday. I was looking at some other lithium-based batteries that had different amount of voltage in these cells. I said it was 3.6 volts. No, it should only be 3.2 volts. So now that we have that cleared up, how do we use this to make a 12-volt battery? The answer is not as complicated as you might think. Now remember that each of these cells had about 2.65 volts when I tested them with the multimeter. Now in a regular car battery, all of the cells that make up the battery are stacked right beside each other. But how you connect them up makes a big difference. These cells have electrodes. That's where the electrical connections are made to the cells. These electrodes have plates, pieces of metal, you think of it as metal, that go the entire length of the cell. That's to collect the charge from the battery. Now, lithium iron phosphate just talks about the chemistry that makes up these individual cells. It's one of the more reliable and safe chemistries for lithium. Since we're going to be using this in a remote fashion, we'll be taking it with us on the road, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have something that was prone to fires or other problems like that. Now, the connections are made with Phillips head screws. What I'm doing is I'm going to connect these cells together, the positive to negative, all the way down. Now, what's that do? Well, that's called a series connection. A series connection is great because what it does is it increases the amount of voltage that our fully assembled battery is going to put out. So, I have 2.65 volts in each of these cells. Oops, I forgot to do something very, very important. I'm going to stop right now. Remember, you don't want to be wearing metal jewelry. A ring, a necklace, anything that can make contact between two pieces of the battery and short it out. It's not that you're going to get electrocuted by a battery. The problem is these individual cells pack a lot of energy, and it can actually make rings glow very, very hot. I've seen somebody who had a permanent ring around his ring finger. That happened because he shorted out a large battery. What I'm doing here is using some specially supplied connectors to go between the various parts of the battery that we're building. Well, that one started. Let's see if this one's going. Now I'm using one of my electrician's screwdrivers. This has an insulator that's intended to keep high voltage from going from the tip of the screwdriver and killing you. Now, the killing would happen from an AC system, so regular line current. There's a specification for how much you should tighten these screws. You don't want to over-tighten them because it will strip out these aluminum connections that connect to the electrodes. We're going to check to see how much voltage we have from connecting these two cells together. I'm using my digital multimeter again. These two cells should put out about a little more than 5 volts. Well, let's see how much it actually is. We have 5.9 volts. Okay, so that's made from 2.65 here and 2.65 here. So we've added up the voltage that each of these cells produces. Now, how do we continue? Well, we need to make sure that we continue this process of connecting the positive to negative, and then negative to positive, and so on down the battery. All right, these two cells are the same voltage, but they're in opposite directions. By opposite direction, I mean this battery shows on the digital multimeter as a minus voltage. When I move to these terminals here, it shows as a plus voltage, which means I have this cell oriented in the right fashion. Now, how do I connect it up? I add the next bus bar. Now, a bus bar is just a piece of metal that goes between two locations that you want to have electricity go between. You have to be careful not to cross thread these screws into that aluminum block, because then you have a real problem. The real problem is simply mechanical. So when I'm doing this, I just hand tighten them, make sure they go in correctly, and then I come back and tighten a little bit. Let's see how our battery progress is going. When we tested between these two terminals, we got 5.9 volts. Now, when we go to the next terminal, we get 8.86 volts, so pretty close to 9 volts. So far we had 2.9, 2.9, and 2.9. Got almost 6 volts at this point, and we got almost 9 volts here. Now, if we put this together correctly, the next cell should get us to about 12 volts. Let's see. One more bus bar. Now, if you decide to do this yourself at home, you need to be very careful not to short between opposite electrodes. By that I mean you don't want to be going between positive and negative with a piece of metal. There we go. Now, the nice thing about these bus bars that were supplied by the cell manufacturer is that you can't accidentally short from one post to the next post. That's a really good thing, because you'd have an awful lot of sparks flying. And you could get hurt because sometimes the metal will explode as it melts. And it wouldn't be a whole lot, but any is not fun. All right, we have 4 cells put together. When they're fully charged, they should create 12.8 volts. Let's see how we're doing now. We have about 11.7 volts. That's the simple way of putting one of these batteries together. But that's not enough. Tomorrow, we'll talk about battery management systems. Lithium batteries are different from lead acid batteries in some important ways. One of those ways is lithium batteries, at least these batteries, shouldn't be charged when the temperature is below freezing. It will mechanically damage the cell, and it may actually cause shorts and other problems, and we don't want that. You also don't want to be charging these cells when the temperature gets above a certain point. So every individual cell that you get is going to have a different set of specifications for operating temperature. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications because we've got a lot more stuff doing. And by the way, Irene's in class right now. She's taking an enameling class from a very well-known enamel instructor. She's been doing it for quite some time. She's having great fun most of the time. Her studio's working well, and she's having some great products come out. Thanks for watching. We'll talk with you later. Bye. Keep brainstorming.